Hey, what is up, guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. I know it's a Sunday, but there's a few cards that I felt like we should have a quick discussion about going into the next week. I actually have a regional to play in next weekend, and I will be playing Labyrinth. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for an updated profile from me, but I really just haven't figured out the right build yet with the new cards. I'll be sure to let you guys know how it goes though. But we were discussing some cards and what things we would be trying to offload or pick up at the regional, and they mentioned some interesting things to me that I hadn't yet noticed. So of course I'm bringing this information to you guys to keep all of you as informed as possible, and hopefully you guys pay attention to this episode and you're able to use this information to your advantage. Let's get started. So kicking things off, we're taking a look at Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous. Now this is a card that has seen a bit of hype over the last week or so, being a brand new card from Darkwing Blast. It is used alongside Branded in High Spirits in the Tier Limit strategy, allowing you to turn Branded in High Spirits and any Dark Tier Limits monster into a copy of Rokalos and Baron, which is honestly kind of busted. Cartesia is a one-of that makes Branded in High Spirits live, and its effect to fuse as a quick effect is actually really cool. Its ability to add itself back from the graveyard to your hand is actually just kind of a bonus. We've seen the card's price bounce around a little bit in the short time since its release. Obviously, the pre-sale prices on TCG Player were quite high, then it fell down to around 20 to 25. It did bounce up a little bit to around 30, and right now it's back down to between $19 and $20. So the surge in price I think is definitely due to people realizing that it could be a useful piece in Tier Limits, since Tier Limits is widely considered to be one of the best decks of the format. However, I think that the whole engine will definitely be outclassed by the Ishizu cards from Magnificent Mavens, which comes out this upcoming weekend, and as a result I think the High Spirits engine will fall off. Honestly, outside of this application, I don't think Cartesia is seeing any sort of competitive usage. It might be played in Despia, but that's kind of a deck that people don't really pay attention to anymore. Because of that, I definitely have Cartesia as a sell. It might not go down too much more from here, maybe down to $15 or so, but after the Ishizu cards come out, it might be quite difficult to find someone who's actually wanting to pick this card up. So simply from a demand perspective, it might be in your best interest to offload this card soon. Next, we'll take a look at Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres. This is a Link 2 monster that requires 2 dragon monsters to make, and it's obviously a card that has seen pretty steady demand ever since its release. It was a big thing in Dragon Link, but obviously now with Hulk and Chaos Ruler being banned, that deck has struggled. However, with the new Bestial cards, we've seen a resurgence with a ton of people trying to play Dragon Link and Dragon Maids, 2 different dragon-based strategies that can obviously take advantage of the Heavenly Spheres, and the card has, as a result, steadily increased in price. The card itself is pretty simple, providing a bounce interruption, as well as the ability to summon a dragon from out of your deck for free, which is pretty cool. Now, while Dragon Link and Dragon Maids aren't going to be meta, dragons in general are pretty popular with a lot of casual players, so there's definitely going to be a demand for this card from the casual player base. In addition, Dragon Maids are a waifu archetype, so they'll catch a lot of attention naturally. The card only has 2 printings, both of which are ultras, and each of those printings is around $10, up from the $5 to $6 range that the card had fallen down to. However, Heavenly Spheres is definitely a sell to me. Until we get a new dragon archetype that looks like it will be meta relevant, I don't think that this card is going to do too much, because Dragon Link and Dragon Maids just aren't going to cut it against the other decks we have this format. Furthermore, I definitely have a feeling that this card is going to get reprinted in an upcoming set, which should bring this card's price down considerably. On to the next one, we have Infernoble Knight Renault. It has been a while since Noble Knights were messing with the meta of using Smoke Grenade to make it really difficult for your opponent to even play the game. Now, while the deck hasn't done too much recently, it does seem like some other decks are looking to use key cards from the strategy, and the notable one from today is Renault, which is seeing play in the Mekanko archetype, a new theme coming out in Amazing Defenders. I didn't look into the archetype too much, but it doesn't really seem that great. I think they have a ritual boss monster, but it focuses around using equip spells to deal damage to your opponent. Anyways, the Mekanko deck is the reason for Renault going up. Renault is a really simple monster. You can special summon it from your hand if you control a fire warrior, and if you do, you get to add an equip spell from your graveyard back to your hand. Because of this, Renault is back up to $20 each, a significant bump up from the $13 or so that it has been at for the last year, though this is somewhat understandable since the card only has ever gotten 1 printing from way back in Toon Chaos. However, in the OCG, Renault got a reprint in Amazing Defenders, so I don't really see why it wouldn't also get a reprint here in the same set in the TCG. And honestly, even if it doesn't get reprinted, right, like, I wouldn't worry about this card too much. The Makenko archetype seems like it's really like a bottom of the barrel archetype that isn't going to see any sort of competitive play. This is definitely a card for you guys to look at offloading if you still happen to be sitting on some old copies. The next card we'll talk about is Book of Lunar Eclipse, which honestly like kind of surprises me, kind of doesn't. Last week we talked about Book of Eclipse and how it was being cited as a tech option because of Kashtira over in the OCG, which are a potentially meta-relevant deck after the next wave of support in Photon Hypernova. Apparently people are now starting to look at Book of Lunar Eclipse as an alternative. So this is similar in that it flips monsters face down so it can shut off some of the Kashtira cards. The one benefit it has is that it doesn't have any effect to draw at the end, right? So it's better if you can't clear those monsters off your opponent's field so that they don't draw, and it isn't susceptible to Ash Blossom either. However, I think that this card is actually like much worse. It requires a discard, so it actually feels like a neg 2 technically, and it also targets, right? Personally, I don't think that this card is going to see any play at all, but I guess only time will tell. However, apparently some people are jumping on the train for this card, and now Starlight Rare Book of Lunar Eclipse has gone from before being like $60 to $70 to now being $140 lowest on TCG Player, which is like double the original price, right? And also we have the original secret rares going from $1 before to now being like $5. This is obviously pretty ridiculous, and I don't think it makes much sense at all. If you guys have either of these versions of this card, I would literally look at selling them like tomorrow before the hype dies down. Of course, you can still pick up a set of these super rares from the Megatins for like $0.25 each, so that can be your backup option to play with just in case the card really does turn out to be good for whatever reason, even though I think that that's incredibly unlikely. Speaking of Kashtira, Dark-Armed Dragon, the Dragon of Annihilation, is a card that has been picking up steam for the last month or so. This is a generic rank 7 monster that could potentially be used in the Kashtira strategy. It has an effect where you can detach a material from it to pop an opponent's card and then banish a card from your own graveyard as well. And this isn't a once per turn effect, which means that you could potentially pop multiple of your opponent's cards. It actually seems really cool. I guess it could be like a mini rank 7 version of Access Code Talker, obviously not nearly as good, but when the new cards do come out in Photon Hypernova, maybe this will be a tech option that people can choose to run in the extra. Anyways, this card used to be only a couple of dollars. I remember people thinking that its summoning overlay condition was just so awkward to meet, and its effect to pop was pretty underwhelming. Obviously, things in the game are a lot different now than they were back then. The card has 2 printings, one as a jump promo and the other one as a secret rare from Battles of Legend Armageddon. But while the card was cheap before, both versions have now spiked to between $8 to $10 a piece, which is obviously considerably more. From the few Kashtira lists that I have seen, I don't think that this card is necessary or required for the deck, but it's probably just going to be a tech option for people to try out. I think that the card is a bit too expensive at this current price for you guys to go out and buy copies of right now expecting it to go up. I probably wouldn't want to pay more than $4 to $5 for a single copy of either version of the card, but it just might be worth digging through some of your old binders or bulk for a few copies of this card to keep in your trade binder. This one is kind of interesting. We have the Herald of Green Light. So hand traps are obviously a really big part of the way Yu-Gi-Oh is played now, which is something that's quite different from old Yu-Gi-Oh. Players are always looking for new ways to abuse older cards that may have been overlooked. Herald of Orange Light is a card that has been pretty heavily abused over in the OCG with the Ishizu cards, which has resulted in it getting limited over there to 1. Here in the TCG, we'll just be getting the Ishizu cards next week, and so a lot of players are assuming Orange Light is going to be a really solid hand trap option here as well. However, one thing that players are considering is alternate hand traps that can be played alongside the Ishizu cards that are still in the game, and while the OCG may be trying this out of necessity, players in the TCG might just want to try out some different tech options, since Green Light could be used to negate key cards like Sprite Starter or Mystic Mine. With Green Light being the new experimental piece that players are looking at, of course we've seen a couple of price jumps for Green Light. The only real holo printing is the old Ultimate Rare version from Enemy of Justice, which is around $50 a piece at the moment. Honestly, super ridiculous. The other higher rarity is the Shatter Foil from one of the battle packs, which is about $5 a piece. Now, fortunately, the card does have several other lower rarity printings, and those are still accessible for under $1, so if I were you guys and I was afraid of this card spiking up, I would grab a set of those myself. I personally think that for right now, people are just going to stick with playing Herald of Orange Light, which seems perfectly reasonable to me. I would definitely look to offload the higher rarity versions of this card that have spiked if I had them, since it will be quite some time before we see a hit to Orange Light or the Ishizu cards. If we do, and I don't think people will be prioritizing Green Light nearly as much as Orange Light in the meantime. Alright, the last card we have for today is Naturia Beast. Specifically here, the reason I'm talking about this card is because of the original dual terminal printing. Dual terminal cards have a very consistent history of spiking whenever people think that a certain card is going to be good. Naturia Beast is no stranger to the meta. It is a level 5 synchro that requires both the tuner and non-tuner to be earth monsters, but by milling 2 cards from the top of your deck, you can negate any spell card and destroy it, and this isn't a once per turn effect. I remember how annoying this card was to deal with back when I was playing Necros a few years ago. Clifford players would side emergency, teleport, and recover just to make this card to try to win the matchup. Obviously, it's not as crazy with things like infinite impermanence in the game, but it's still a potentially really useful card if you can combine it with other points of interaction. So right now, I don't think there's any meta decks that are using this card. However, the one deck that can make use of this is Naturia, which got some support in Darkwing Blast and works really well with the new Ishizu cards coming out in Magnificent Mavens. I don't think that the deck will be top tier or anything like that. It'll definitely be an interesting tier 2, maybe like rogue type deck. Now, it's the old DT versions that have spiked. The cheapest available, I think, is around $190, but the most that any have sold for is, I think, $130, $140. Big range, but here I'm just going to say that it's well over the $100 mark. The other notable printing is the original Secret Rare from Hidden Arsenal 2. Those are around $10 to $12 a piece. All of the other versions are pretty cheap. I think it has a couple of ultra rare and then gold rare printings, and the card is pretty accessible at only a couple of dollars each. Obviously, you guys are going to know my take on this. I would dump that original DT printing as soon as possible and just pick up whatever decent looking lower rarity you want, because not only will the card come down in price eventually, I think you guys will be hard pressed to find anyone who's actually willing to pay that astronomical price, and if you can, you should definitely sell and take advantage of that. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. I don't know if I'm going to be uploading anything else this week. I have that regionals to prep for. Also, Magnificent Mavens is coming out this week. I'm meeting up some friends at my local OTS. We do this thing where we open up like a couple cases of the set, and we take all the packs and we lay them out on a table, and then we just take turns opening a pack at a time. It's a lot of fun, and if you have friends that don't mind opening up packs with you and spending a bit of money, I definitely recommend supporting your local OTS stores and trying it out. It's super fun. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button for me. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below letting me know what cards are trending on the market so that I can cover them in a future episode, as well as what you guys think about the cards that we talked about today. Also, if you haven't already, do make sure that you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.